my fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions
No,
of
I got
relevant
that.
resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access. yes.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by mythmakers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe. is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans. Right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It didn't come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It
no
is
one is
molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result
No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible and human, and you funded it. And you admit the truth. And you implying...
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Do it live. Welcome, everybody, to Redacted. Welcome to the Rebellion. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. We also are vehemently anti-war. So if you are anti-war, welcome to the largest anti-war network community on YouTube and Rumble. Nice to see all of you. We've got a jam-packed show for you on this Tuesday. We're going to be looking at the economy. There's a couple of really troubling signs that are unfolding economically. A number of analysts calling attention to some very eerily similar things to what we saw in 2008. right before the Lehman Brothers collapse. But this is a lot different than the subprime mortgage mess. It looks a lot different, and we're going to dive into why the recession may already be in full swing for low and middle income people right now, and not just in the United States, but around the world in a lot of Western nations. So we're going to go through the data, really, really troubling signs that we're going to get to tonight.
Plus, the World Health Organization is still meeting to figure out the treaty that will give them pandemic power for the world. Since world is in their name, They want the world. It's not too much to ask. Republicans do not want that. They introduced a bill today to prevent the president from signing this into law, but they did that last year. So will that work? We're going to go over it. Nothing but just a little global hegemony. That's all.
And 15-minute cities. What is the update here? There's a number of protests breaking out, but the World Economic Forum, of course, has been pushing for you to not own anything, to get rid of your car, to live at home, to basically work remotely in these 15-minute cities, that everything nearby, everything you would need would be within 15 minutes of your life. So you could hop on a bike and go get everything you need. It sounds maybe utopic, right? But there's some dark dystopic, or for some people, hey, that sounds great. I can just walk anywhere and get anything I need within 15 minutes. Yeah, that sounds maybe nice, and maybe that's how they're selling it to you. But it's already popping up in a number of cities, but there's a number of thousands of people taking to the streets in protest of these 15-minute cities. So we'll look at that tonight, all of that and more, as Redacted starts right now. Welcome in. This is the show that almost didn't happen today, by the way, just a little behind the scenes here. We had a major power outage, and a huge fuse blew in one of the phases of the studio. And so of all of the things that we needed power for in the whole area, the studio was totally dark. So spent a couple of hours running cables to different areas of the house and property in order to get power, in order to even get the show on the air tonight. So it was... Do
you think there's some malfeasance?
There's some malfeasance going on.
Some pro-war people out there cutting some lines. Well, we're here right now anyway.
Yeah, who knows? But we're here. So we got cables running all over the place. And so not everything is as it should be, but we do have a show for you. So thank you so much for supporting what we do here, supporting independent journalism, supporting Redacted. We really, really appreciate it.
Speaking of supporting Redacted, we'd like to tell you about our Redacted newsletter. It comes out every day, Monday through Friday. It is written by myself and Clayton. Most of the little funnier quips are from Clayton. He's the headline. He's the blurber, the blurbologist. He's the blurbist.
Like that.
And so it is meant to be a companion to this show where you can read the things that are top of mind. And then a couple hours later, you get us live. We do it live. So please do subscribe to the newsletter. It also helps us to communicate with you in the event that any of these platforms decide they don't like what we're saying and we cannot get to you otherwise. It's totally free. Just go to redacted.inc. Type in your email address, authenticate it, and then we're off to the races, and you get this every day. It's fun, it's free, it's from us to you.
That's right. So thank you guys so much for subscribing. And if you do subscribe to the show live during the show here, your name will pop up here on the big screen live. So whether you're on Rumble or on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button, please, and your name will pop up here. We're live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time on this show. So welcome. All right, let's get to our top story now, which is troubling signs in the economy. We have 4 big troubling signs that we are heading for an economic disaster, problem, however you want to slice it. We're going to get to all of them in a moment. But first, we've been watching these major indicators over the past couple of months for an incoming recession. We've been covering it here on the show. At the end of the summer, we started to sound the alarm here on Redacted about the concerns over massive layoffs that could be coming after the Christmas holiday. We were warning about this because obviously you get all the Christmas hiring, but even that hiring during the Christmas season was much, much lower than it was before. And then Of course, you have Amazon with tens of thousands of layoffs, and banks with thousands of layoffs, and Silicon Valley with tens of thousands of layoffs. Like, what's going on here? So it turns out we were right. We weren't happy that we were right, but we were. Companies all across many, many sectors have started laying off a lot of people. And people are losing their jobs in droves, more layoffs today. In fact, new data out today from the Challenger jobs report shows something very disturbing. So take a look at your screen here. And for those of you that are driving, we know we have a lot of lorry drivers and cab drivers and Uber drivers and truck drivers who listen to our show. So what I'll describe for you here as you're driving, please don't get in an accident. On the left side of your screen in the Challenger jobs report is 2008, okay? Now that left arrow there shows the acceleration of jobs that were suddenly being lost prior to the Lehman Brothers collapse and the subprime mortgage meltdown. So this was prior. They knew something was coming, and the layoffs started before the crash. Now on the right side of your screen, the acceleration is now moving at a faster pace than we were seeing before the Lehman Brothers collapse. Swallow that, if you will. I don't want to. So again, the right side of your screen, more quickly, the speed with which jobs were being lost more quickly and happening faster than they were before the Lehman Brothers collapse. Something is going on here. Even despite that Christmas boost, Challenger reports that layoffs were up 172% in the fourth quarter of 2022. 172%. That's amazing. And these jobs losses are not just occurring in the United States. They are occurring all around the world. We looked into data today from a whole lot of international companies to see what this layoff picture looked like, laying off thousands of people. Here's just a few examples to highlight here from multiple sectors I wanted to pull. This is BASF, cutting 2,600 jobs after a year of high energy costs, reports the Wall Street Journal. They are a chemical production company. You know it's bad when chemical production companies are laying people off in Germany. Thousands of people because of high energy costs. Whose fault is that? Maybe BASF could send a note to the Biden administration about that Nord Stream pipeline that they blew up. Now that we're having to lay off 2,600 people.
Might not have had to do that if we had some affordable energy.
British Steel also in the same boat. Take a look. British Steel announcing hundreds of jobs lost. As a result, they're laying people off of, again, high energy prices. And to produce that steel, too costly. Also one of the reasons why they don't have tanks in Germany. Having a difficult time getting all of that, the materials and, of course, the process of actually making the tanks. Too costly. South Africa, job losses could be staggering as construction dries up in the western part of the Cape. So where you used to see a lot of construction dried up. And there are concerns that the mining sector in South Africa could be slammed, platinum, etc. And then in Scotland, not to be outdone, here in the Glasgow Times reporting, the government is laying off trash collectors, even as they charge more to collect trash. So, charging you more, laying off the people that collect the trash. That makes a lot of sense, right? Pay us higher taxes for things that we won't do.
Monthly bin collection. Yeah. So can you imagine your household?
One month of garbage piling up?
Yeah, that's really tough. So you're going to have to drive that in yourself.
Yeah, and you can't. And if you put it outside, of course, then you get fined. You get fined, and you're getting animals all over the place as well. So you're putting it outside, you're getting all these animals, and they're also closing down parks in Scotland. So where the kids go to play, they're closing off the parks. Remember that during the lockdowns when they put that yellow tape around outdoor playgrounds so kids couldn't play on slides? That's what they're doing in Scotland. Closing down parks because they can't afford to pay the trash collectors to come to the parks and clean up the trash. So they're
do you remember seeing the pictures of the national parks in the United States with trash just heaping everywhere?
Yeah,
I remember specifically pictures of that.
Yeah,
we had in our neighborhood in New Jersey, we lived in one of the highest tax counties in the U.S. And we only got recycling twice a month. So we would have to drive it in ourselves if we wanted it to be recycled.
Yeah, cardboard boxes.
Because otherwise that stuff just, I know it's a first world problem, but it still is a nuisance. And especially when you're paying high taxes and not getting services for it.
Yeah, and New Jersey, of course, one of the most crazy taxed states in the country.
Well, we were specifically in Essex County, which is, I think it's in the top 5 taxed counties in the country.
Yeah. And it's not like it's the nicest county in the country or anything like that. By a long shot. It's not at all. Very high crime. Anyway, so it's not just the United States. It's Western countries who pushed insane sanctions against Russia in the same boat or the same sinking boat. So here today, these are new inflation numbers out today on Spain and France. Just look at this. Again, back up again. Inflation rising again in France and Spain. Layoffs are one thing. But the second thing, and maybe the biggest part of this story, and it could be our clearest sign yet that there are major problems hitting the economy, you'd be right to think of what happened in 2008, and you'd immediately begin to think of the housing market, right? You'd begin to think of all of those houses, the people that had mortgages with no jobs, and you'd think, oh, it's happening again if it's a repeat of 2008. But it's not. This time, it's cars and car loans. Once again, the mainstream media is ignoring this story because they're too lazy to look at the data for some reason. So what's going on here? Well, there's a couple of major indicators that I want to talk about here. Number one, they're part of a disturbing picture, durable goods. So these economic terms, might make your head spin a little bit. I understand that. So durable goods, basically, just the things you can touch, tangible things you can put on your shelf for up to 3 years. They're anything from electronics to buying a car. These are things that consumers would be happy to spend money on, right? Durable goods. And the health of an economy is largely based on your ability to go and buy things, right? You can go to the store, you can pick up that present for someone at their birthday. That's the health of the economy. When those things are okay, then we've got a healthy economy. If you can't buy those things, that's bad. Then, of course, companies stop producing those things because there's no demand, and then people get laid off. And that's what's happening. They lose their jobs, the economy collapses, and that's precisely what we're starting to see right now. Companies are noticing that demand for durable goods is drying up. We just got new data out yesterday for January, and durable goods numbers shows dramatic plunge in durable goods. Sales down 5%. This is the largest plunge since the start of the pandemic for durable goods. And there's no pandemic. I mean, there's nobody telling us the malls are closed, you can't buy anything. So what's going on here? At the pandemic, people were freaking out and they stayed home. So now we have no pandemic. People can go out shopping as much as they want, but they can't afford to. So what is happening here? Well, just take a look at this chart and you can see a little Christmas bump and then it just falls off. This is a fall off here for durable goods and down 5%. So people aren't buying as much. Why? I don't know, but I have a theory. People simply don't have expendable income like they used to. They don't have that extra money in their wallet. I'd be curious to hear in our chat today, do you guys have a lot of expendable income?
No, because consumer debt is at an all-time high.
Yes.
So clearly that they don't.
Right. So, or they're just taking on more. Yeah, they're taking on more and more credit card debt, which we'll get to in a second. But listen to Vice President Kamala Harris, the Biden administration. She says the Biden administration has actually lowered your energy prices and put more money in your pocket so you can go out to dinner, you can go on vacation.
Every day, Joe Biden and I talk about and work together with our partners like former Leader Hoyer, current Leader Hoyer, to lower the cost for the people of our nation, because you are a leader. For working families, we have reduced heating and electricity bills. So folks have more money in their pocket to buy things like school supplies, replace the dishwasher, or take a family vacation.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So many
Did they
people.
let anybody else know?
Right.
I don't know if they told the power companies and everybody else that that's what's going on, because it doesn't look that way. It doesn't look that way.
It doesn't look that way. And according to our chat room right now, both on Rumble and here on YouTube, nope. Everyone saying nope. I don't have that expendable income right now. And Americans are now digging, as Natalie was saying earlier, digging deeper and deeper into their pockets and going further and further into debt to stay afloat right now, just to pay basic bills using credit cards to pay the bills, not going out to eat, not doing other things like that, just to pay like car bills. U.S. credit card debt jumps 18.5%. Hits a record $930 billion in credit card debt. And you know who's happy about that? The credit card companies. American Express just had a blowout quarter. I mean, they just announced amazing results. They love it, right? They acknowledge this. They had huge earnings. That's great. But then they also let the cat out of the bag. And what's funny is now they're starting to admit, American Express and Discover and others are saying, people are starting to fall behind on their bills. They're not paying their bills on time. Now, this isn't just American Express. It's Discover Card and others. So here's the data. Here's what the American debt looks like. This according to American Express. Look at that. Now, COVID-19 hits, right? Then the government steps in and issues all sorts of stimulus checks, right?
And locks down societies where people had expendable income because they weren't going to the movies or out or paying for ballet lessons for their kids or anything like that.
Or paying rent, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right? So then you see this American Express graph, and then suddenly now, boom, it surpasses the pandemic and then takes off. Discover Card also just announcing over the past few days, their charge-off rate would double this year from where it was last year. Meaning the number of people who can't pay their bills would double. That means they're going to have to write off these unbelievable delinquencies from people that can't afford to pay it. Mm-hmm. That means the bottom, and it really means because Discover really caters to people that have a lower credit score. So they're more likely to approve a credit card. This is according to analysts. It's not what I'm saying. They cater to those whose credit scores are a little bit lower. So you can get a Discover card where you might not be able to get like an Amex card. So the fact that this means then that the bottom and middle class Americans are already in a recession, according to these experts. But perhaps the biggest sign, and this is really what I want to draw your attention to, and again, the mainstream media is ignoring this story, really, really troubling, is that where we're heading for a major recession is in car loans. Now, I remember a time, even back years ago, Ron Paul was openly talking about this years ago, talking about, the insurance market, but also all of these car loans where we had all the trouble in the housing market. And then, of course, they swept in with these laws to make sure that people couldn't get homes if they didn't have a job or they didn't have good credit, all of those things, right? Now, and he was warning about car loans, that it was like the Wild West. You could still get a car loan basically without anything. And the problem is car loans, we just hit a wall. Americans simply can't afford to make their payments on their cars right now for their loans. Late last year, delinquencies on car loans started accelerating and a flood of repossessed cars started hitting the market. On top of that, the used car sale prices started plummeting. So supply and demand. Remember during the pandemic when you couldn't get a used car?
You couldn't get any car.
You couldn't get any car. Maybe they were sold out everywhere, right? But used car prices, instead of it being where usually used car prices go down, no, used car prices were skyrocketing. And they haven't really come down that much. Two big problems, according to Zero Hedge. The latest consumer credit report from the Fed reveals a dramatic spike in the amount of new car loans. This is troubling, which increased by more than $2,000 in one quarter, from just over $38,000, which was a record, to $40,000 is a new record for car loans.
Wait, an average per loan?
Yeah.
People are taking out $40,000 for cars.
$40,000 for car loans.
Okay.
Up $2,000. Americans basically have to go in debt in order to buy a used car, instead of a used car costing between $8,000 and $12,000. Now they're double the price to buy a used car. And so then, inflation hits, right? So then inflation hits, and then suddenly now they can't pay their car loans back. And so I want to really hesitate here to sort of, say that it's very similar to what we saw in the subprime mortgage area, because for a lot of people who obviously they don't have access to public transportation and they need a car to get to work, they're trying to buy the cheapest car they could find. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to buy a used car, the cheapest one they could find. And because prices have skyrocketed, they had to get one that they have to spend $7,000 or $8,000 more than they normally would. And they can barely make ends meet. And then recession hits, inflation hits.
Yeah.
And now the cost of everything goes up. Their energy bills go up. Their grocery bills go up. And now they can't pay their car loans back.
And the interest on those loans are going up because the usury rate is up.
Yeah, so the interest rate, yeah, you're right, good point. So the interest rate on the loan goes up. All of these things are coming together at the same time. And now we're seeing Americans falling behind on car payments at a higher rate than in 2009, according to Bloomberg. Just take a look at this headline today. Unbelievable. And according to NBC News, car repos are on the rise now to pre-pandemic levels, according to NBC News. Look at this. Car repossessions are on the rise in warning sign for the economy. It's not more than a warning sign. Like if someone's showing up at your house with a flatbed truck, that's not just a warning sign. Like you're screwed for a lot of people, right? How are you going to get to work now? And I've read countless stories today, horror stories about people who just are waking up, finding out that their car has been taken. And they're like 1 month behind on a payment, or for one woman, she's like almost done paying it off and they came and took it. A recent report from Fitch Ratings shows that people are unable to pay their car loans. Many of these car loans have been packaged up and sold off by Wall Street. So if that sounds familiar, it should. Of course, this is a lot of what happened during the subprime mortgage loan. So a lot of these bundled loans, these car loans are packaged up and sold. Then they didn't learn their lesson. We got burned in the housing markets, and now these prepackaged subprime loans are bundled up, and people are going to be screwed by it. Go ahead, Philip.
There's a sort of a viral story going on right now. I saw it on Reddit, and I'll try to remember the exact numbers. But it's a woman that got a car loan for a 1998, something like a Ford Taurus, and the loan is $298 a month for 84 months. For a 1998, just basic Ford Taurus.
No,
yeah, almost $300 a month for 84 months.
Holy cow!
Wow.
Yeah, I saw someone in the chat just says their car was just repoed as well.
I mean, I think I got my first brand new car for a payment like that. Like brand new, not 20 years old.
Yeah. So this story, and someone says they don't repo your car for being 1 month late. You're right. No, this woman had a specific situation, but she literally was about to have it paid off, and she got some additional bill that she just got, and it was literally within 1 month time frame.
Yeah.
So it was related to the car. Anyway, long story short, she got her car repoed, and she was literally next month about to have the thing paid off.
But the tale here is similar because we all know that a car depreciates the moment it drives off the lot.
So they tell us. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And so just like the housing market, when housing values were upside down, you have an asset attached to a loan that is worth much less than the loan is. And so we've read this book before.
Yeah, it's crazy. So just look at the new subprime auto loans that were taken out by people in the past 2 years. Look at this. These are new car loans versus new car consumer price index. Look at this. So the car loans have just skyrocketed, and people going further into debt. New 60-month auto loan national average rate. Look at that. 60-month auto loan national rate. Boom. There are reports coming in all over the country of people waking up, finding their cars repossessed. Like this one caught on a door cam while she was asleep. She didn't know. She comes out in the morning and finds, where did my car go? Was it stolen? No, just the flatbed repo guy just pulled up, zip, boom, backs up, pops the car right on the flatbed, takes off, repoed. It's not even a new car. I mean, that's the tale over and over again, that these cars, in many cases, these cars are like 10 years old or older. Just take them. So the story here is that for rich people, you're not going to feel it like this woman or the countless, thousands of people who are going through this right now in the bottom and middle class. And of course, this is reverberating across Western countries. And the near and subprime group of consumers, they're getting hit very hard by inflation and this man-made economic crisis, which of course, putting ridiculous sanctions on Russia and cutting off fuel sources and cheap natural gas and fuel sources for Western countries. So all of this is artificial. All of this is man-made at the heart of it. There's no tsunami that caused this.
Can I give you another conspiracy theory possibility?
Fire away.
Is that because they're pushing us away from gas-guzzling cars, this is another way to discourage gas-powered cars, to repo gas-powered cars, to push away from this in order to sort of take the choice out of the matter.
Yeah, I mean, because you're seeing there's certainly a government incentive for you to buy electric cars, right? So they're putting in all the sort of government incentives to buy electric, and all of those things.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I bet GM's kicking themselves in the butt right now for repealing the electric car many years ago. They missed the push
from the
by
90s.
Just a few years.
Well, now that Philip was talking about these 90s cars, like probably get one of those for, $80,000. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. I mean, I think this is exactly what, this is what they want. They've told us that this is what they want. The Biden administration, the EU is getting rid of gas cars by
2035. And so, if you have harsh lending policies on these cars, you increase the amount to buy them.
Right.
So I wonder if people are going to a dealership and saying, I need a car. And they're like, well, you can't have any gas powered cars, but let me make you a deal you can't refuse on this electric car.
Here's a rebate on your taxes or whatever else. Yeah.
I'm curious. And we published a story in the newsletter not too long ago about how in Japan they're trying to retrofit old vintage cars. So they take like old El Caminos and somehow like put an electric engine in it and be like, well, it still works. It's got a good frame, So that's also kind of a fun thing that we can do to upcycle cars. But
if you can afford it.
Well, I think
to find parts like that.
It just blows my mind how short-sighted like the idea is behind this. Like where you got those elites that are like trying to push us into this situation, but historically it has never worked well for the ruling class and the elite to push people into the point where they're in desperation. When you push the populace, the majority of the populace, to the point of desperation, that has never worked well.
Yeah.
Never. And it usually ends up bad for the people that did it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand what they expect people to do.
Right. Well, they want you to stay home. I mean, this is the dream. And that's why we're going to talk in a little bit here about these 15-minute cities. I mean, this is what they want, right? They want you to stay home. They don't want you to use these cars. They want you to live off of government subsidies, and they want to control you. And this is a brilliant way to do that, right?
Yeah.
Force you out of these things so you can't use these cars in the first place. So we'll be keeping our eye on this subprime car loan thing and what's happening in the broader economy, because there's a number of really troubling signs right now as we head into more layoffs. So we'll keep our eye on that. We're also going to look at the WHO and who's running the United States. The Senate wants to fight back on that. We have also got a special guest. Garland Nixon is going to be joining us. He fired off a tweet heard round the world when he said that the Biden administration was literally about to use Taiwan as a launch pad for destruction and war. Taiwan didn't like that.
Plus, we are going to talk about the Dilbert controversy around the
canceling
the cartoonist Scott Adams and how that's been pulled from newspapers around the U.S. We're going to talk about what he actually said, whether or not it is possible to be racist against white people. We're going to do that on Rumble. Hopefully you join us there, because we're going to talk about things that,
YouTube doesn't like.
Finish that sentence. I don't even need to say it.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the World Health Organization. Here's a question. Will Congress stop President Biden from handing over powers to the World Health Organization? Republicans are trying to do that with a new bill, and they are using anti-China sentiment to push for support. Now, we spoke at length yesterday about how there's a renewed anti-China sentiment, which my theory is that it's meant to rile up Republicans who are otherwise aiming towards peace between Russia and Ukraine and saying, well, hey, if you're not pissed off enough about Russia, let me, I'll see you a Russia and I'll raise you a China. So we see a lot of anti-China rhetoric right now in the media. The media is just gobbling it up like ice cream. And Republicans have sort of latched on to this. It's like they're just like played like a fiddle.
They are. It is amazing. I was having a conversation with somebody I won't name nameless today, but it's like, I can't believe these Republicans are falling for this China stuff. Yeah. It's amazing to watch, big...
It's like dog and bone. Here you go.
Yeah.
So, whereas Republicans were starting to be grumbling about the cost of war of human lives, the cost in dollars, and starting to say, hey, we want to see some peace talks. We don't want to continue to open our wallet for Ukraine. And so the White House said, well, let me stir the pot a little bit. And they just sort of dropped a bomb with anti-China rhetoric, and Republicans are like, oh yeah, I'm all in. Okay.
It's like a shark with blood in the water.
So they think the way that we're connecting this to the World Health Organization is that Republicans believe that the World Health Organization is China controlled, And so because of this treaty that we spoke about at length last week, that the Biden administration does support handing over power to the World Health Organization for all future pandemics, but it would give them the power to declare and prepare for future pandemics, which means their power inside sovereign nations will be pretty open-ended, because you always have to prepare for the next pandemic, right? You can always have one coming. We've heard them warn about 4 this year already. So this treaty is called the CA+. This is the summary we talked about just last week. It gives the WHO powers to define the next pandemic, to determine lockdowns. It gives them surveillance power. It gives them the power to determine treatments, vaccine mandates, vaccine distribution, vaccine intellectual property and profits, and the redistribution of pretty much everything. We talked about that at length. Now, the pandemic treaty gives them the power to declare and manage global pandemic emergencies. And they began to work out the draft of this treaty just today. So this had been in draft form for the last couple of months. And this week it kicked off the 4th meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body. Here they are today, doing this, working out the details of this document. And then they are expected to vote on it in May. Now, recall the draft bit that we went over last week still had placeholders for them to define their powers and even define the things that would give them powers, such as, I underlined the things that I thought were concerning here, like pathogens with pandemic potential. Like how do they define that? They're not sure yet. The ellipsis here is theirs. Like literally, they're like, let's work this out. We're not sure what these things mean yet. One Health surveillance, infodemic, interpandemic. They don't even know what recovery means. Like they don't know how to define when a pandemic is done, which is problematic. So they don't know what it is. They don't know the beginning, end, or middle is basically what this tells me. And so they're going to figure that out this week.
Right.
I have a serious problem with coming up with the made-up term prior to defining it. It should work the other way around.
Yeah.
Like we have a problem, we know what it is, let's come up with a word for it. They're like, let's create a word, now then we'll figure out what it means.
Right.
Well, like Control WQ in our chat on YouTube says, like I said last night, quote, the next pandemic, we have to plan for it. What, like they planned for this one? Like they didn't plan at all for this one. It was a total disaster.
Good point. Again, you know, the word infodemic is the thing that really gives me the most stomachache here, because they are able to define a pandemic. This is from just previous to that. They say the pandemic means the global spread of a pathogen or a variant that infects human populations with limited or no immunity through sustained and high transmissibility from person to person, overwhelming health systems with severe morbidity and high mortality. Okay, so these are the things we saw. Like, at first it wasn't so much that COVID was fatal, is that it was overrunning hospitals. So they left room for that, right? So they know what a pandemic is. They don't know how they can apply that to an infodemic, meaning that if there's any possibility for us to be guilty of wrongthink, then they can say, oh, that may lead to severe morbidity and high mortality or what have you. Like the idea that thoughts and ideas and speech are linking to human mortality, and so that they can control speech. Another thing we discussed was this idea of social listening campaigns. I have another word for this. Here's what they say. They want to strengthen pandemic and public health literacy, and they will do this by conducting regular social listening and analysis, which says to me it's giving them the power of surveillance.
Yes.
You know, they say they want to do this so that they could make you a better science and health consumer, make you smarter in those fields. Okay. And then finally, the power to change market economies is another thing that gives me a heartache, that they say that they can identify these risks, and including but not limited to climate change, land use change, wildlife trade, desertification, and antimicrobial resistance, meaning they can say, well, because the way you're using your land to farm for food, you know, it's creating climate change, so I need to take your land, that kind of thing, which can and has been done. We've heard from people in New Zealand who say that their government is doing that to them now.
Well, there's people in the
modern
chat.
times.
There was somebody in the chat says, nope, I'm not going to do that. I don't care what they say. I don't care what papers they sign. Well, the thing is, they come and take your land through eminent domain. This is exactly what they've been doing, basically.
Yeah.
So they're doing this in New Zealand. They're doing this in the Netherlands. And they can absolutely do this. We're going to see people rising up with arms and saying, you're not coming on my land. You want to try to come on my land?
Yeah. That gives
It's
me
going to be the
pause.
railroad all over again.
Yeah, you're going to see the sale of guns again, taking off.
It wouldn't surprise me to see, though, that if they used this to do like what they kind of tried to do and were able to convince tech companies to go along with, but is actually go in and censor the information that the government doesn't want. If they can get like an actual bill through that gives that power, where they can actually compel like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook to take things down, not just ask and hope they comply, but
Yes.
to compel them to do so, then that gives them like that's what I'm hearing when I see this, like, they're interested in what we know. That to me, what I hear is like, and we want to control it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, we saw this with YouTube already. We don't even have this law signed, and already YouTube's terms of service are literally directed by the WHO.
Yeah.
You just go to terms of service right now on YouTube and read it, and it all is how many times do they mention WHO, World Health Organization, in their terms of service?
Yes, absolutely.
Repeatedly.
Well, let me tell you what U.S. lawmakers are doing about this, and maybe you can share with me what your local leaders, if you're not an American citizen, what are the leaders in your country doing, if anything, about it? If you're an African leaders seem to be standing up to this, but most Western countries are not. U.S. lawmakers are using the anti-China sentiment to oppose this. I say you don't need that foreign element to garner support from this, but that's what they say. Here is the title page of the bill. It's called the No WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty Without Senate Approval Act. It would require a supermajority vote in the Senate before the president can hand over this power to the WHO. Now, one of the bill's sponsors, Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, said this about it. She says the World Health Organization is a puppet for the Chinese Communist Party. Their mismanagement of the COVID-19 pandemic made it abundantly clear they should never have a say over America's response to any crisis. It's time for President Biden to put the rights of the American people ahead of the corrupt public health experts, in quotes, who are only interested in lining their pockets and amplifying Xi Jinping's propaganda. Agree, the World Health Organization doesn't have a good grade on the previous pandemic, so why should they get full power on the next one? Senator Johnson made a less China-based statement, but more to the point, I think we all agree, and that the WHO, again, didn't do so great on the last one. He said here the WHO, along with federal health agencies, failed miserably in their response to COVID-19. The failure should not be rewarded with new international treaty that would increase WHO's power at the expense of American sovereignty. Yes, absolutely agree. Nothing in there I disagree with, except to say don't get yourself too excited about this, because Senator Johnson introduced a bill just like this last year. And what happened to it? Well, it was sent to the Committee on Foreign Relations, where it has languished ever since. So will this one do any better? Well, it might, now that you know about it, and you can call your senator and ask them to support it. And we will continue to follow up on the rewrite of this draft as the WHO meeting wraps up this Friday.
It's amazing to me, if you're a member of Congress, right? You're one of 50, you're one of 100 senators, right? And you're 50 from your party, basically, 50-50 split Senate. And you're sitting there in the Senate thinking, I'm one of 100 people that really get to drive policy and really take care of my country. And here I am, I'm going to cede control to a group of unelected globalists who aren't billionaires. Bill Gates, by the way, as we should point out, the World Health Organization is funded almost entirely, in large part and entirely, by the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. So why do you cede control? Unless there's something more nefarious going on, where there's money, donations, pay for play, something. How are you, as U.S. Senator, that just cedes control to a foreign body and just gives up power? Like, here you go, United States Constitution be damned. We're just turning this over to the WHO.
I don't know, but it's not over yet. And I read the comments on the segment we did on this last week when we broke down this treaty. And people are fired up about it, and they don't like it, and they're pissed. And I see the comments on Twitter where this is shared, and we still have a say while you still have an elected representative. So at this point, when people say, what can we do to stop this? Well, right now, there's a bill to support. That's the bare minimum that we can do.
Yeah, the bare minimum, at least, that we can do is protest and get on the phone, send an email to your elected representative and tell them absolutely not, do not cede power to the World Health Organization from the United States.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we can do. That's one thing we can do. Another thing we can do, and we've got more news to get to here on the show. Garland Nixon is going to be joining us, political talk show host. He's going to be talking about this tweet heard round the world that got the Taiwanese government scared crapless, calling up the Biden administration over this. Pretty amazing story. Just goes to show you how close we are to war with China when a tweet sends people into a tizzy. We're also going to look at these 15-minute cities. We're going to talk about Dilbert and the canceling of Scott Adams and so much more. But first, we have a store. I should tell you about our store. If you want to support independent journalism, head on over. Redactedstore.com is the place you can go to get your independent merchandise for independent journalism. It helps support the show. It helps keeps the lights on here, which, by God, if you caught at the beginning of the show, you know we almost didn't have a show tonight because we had to run power cables all over the place. So it does help keep the show on the air and support our team here. So just go over to redactedstore.com, pick up a hat, pick up a mug, pick up a tumbler, anything that you might like. We've got some exclusive brand new designs coming next Monday. We will announce them and show you a new surprise. But right now, these are the classics. So grab any of the classics that you want in the old store. Redactedstore.com is the place to go. Redactedstore.com. Well, it is the tweet literally heard round the world. For anyone that follows Garland Nixon, political analyst and a great talk show host on Twitter, knows he can be very funny, but it's his biting political satire that gets to the heart of the matter. So he tweeted the other day, breaking news, White House insiders leak that when asked if there could be any greater disaster than the neocon Ukraine project, President Biden responded, quote, "Wait until you see our plan for the destruction of Taiwan." And, of course, this tweet wasn't real. It was satire, but that didn't matter. It got picked up by news organizations around the world as truth and set off a firestorm, and it's continuing to go viral. So we thought we'd ask Garland Nixon to join us on the show to provide some context on this tweet. Garland, what led to you deciding to put this tweet out in the first place?
Believe it or not, it was the Nord Stream bombing. As everyone knows, I am known for my satirical breaking news tweets, but, they always have some little, I'll put it like this. My heroes, the people that I look up to when it comes to comedy are, Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Lenny Bruce, people who were social commentators, used social commentary via humor. And so I'm looking at that and I start thinking about how the U.S. treats its allies. And I remembered an article, I brought it back up, where some people from the Pentagon were literally discussing that if there was a military conflict between China and Taiwan, maybe they should blow up TSMC, which is Taiwan's, premier industry, which is their chip industry. And I thought, well, that's no way to treat a friend. That's a destruction plan for Taiwan. Literally, it is a destruction plan for Taiwan. So I thought to myself, believe it or not, I've ordered I'm at this Salvadoran place, and I've ordered some food, and I'm waiting for my Salvadoran food, and I take out my phone, and as usual, I do my breaking news tweets. But again, they're on the edge of reality. And so I tweet this, and next thing I know, it's all over the news in Taiwan and China, everywhere. And as I read it, it became obvious to me, A, if you read that, I guess you don't know if it's true or not. And B, whether President Biden said, that's the eventual outcome. If you take a tiny island like Taiwan and you make it a battleground between two nuclear superpowers, it ain't going to work out well for one of these. I'm just throwing it out there like that.
Exactly. I think that's why this tweet was so powerful, because this is, in any great satire, there is truth, right? And so when you see this and you say to yourself, well, that is actually the plan. Like, for anyone who's been following the story for any length of time knows that that's basically the plan, using Taiwan as a proxy, right, to carry out whatever kind of craziness we're about to unleash. I mean, all you need to do over the past 48 hours, 48, 72 hours is see how many Biden administration officials have been brought out to talk about China red lines, right? And all like the list of if China continues to really push for putting weapons inside Ukraine, that is going to lead to their destruction. They're all on the same page mysteriously about this. So I think the reason this is so powerful is there's so much truth hidden in this tweet, isn't it?
Yes, and in fact, again, I had been looking into some of the background. 6 months into the war, on CNN, there's a recording of Lindsey Graham talking about Taiwan, and he says, "Yes, the Ukrainians, they are fighting to the last Ukrainian, and we expect in Taiwan to fight to the last man in Taiwan also." So, this is a reality of how these people look at the lives of the people in their countries that they're using for a proxy. And in the same way, I would argue they're not looking out for the best interests of Americans, because this is our number one trading partner. If the United States would go to war with China, A, they would be risking nuclear holocaust, and B, best case scenario that we're all not killed in a nuclear holocaust, which is actually the likelihood, they would wipe out our economy and we'd drop back to the Stone Ages. So they're not looking out for the interest of Americans. And God knows what would happen to Taiwan is unthinkable. And here's what I would say. The reason that tweet took off like it did, because it's like you have a forest and everything is dry tinder. It only takes one spark to light it on fire. And that's the dry tinder in Taiwan and Asia. Everybody knows that the neocons are going to set Taiwan up to be blown to hell. And one little spark of some schmuck on Twitter saying, guys, they're about to blow you guys to smithereens, was enough for, I'm sure 1 million Taiwanese, they found the palm of their hands hitting them in the forehead. Oh,
Yeah, you're right about that.
I think it's not going to work out.
I mean,
well.
we've been here before historically, right? You're a student of history. I mean, look, all it takes is that little spark. World War I, right? Spanish-American War. A lot of these major conflicts start with something like this. So when you saw that this was taking off, you saw how the media was all the way around the world was covering this. What stood out to you about their coverage?
Well, I started thinking about what happened. What really stood out to me about their coverage is I read that the Taiwanese government quickly went to the U.S. State Department, went to the U.S. government and said, "Is this true?" And that struck me as to how close it is to reality. And I thought, I would be willing to bet, based on the history of Joe Biden's gaffes and how close this is to reality, that the State Department didn't know if it was true. They likely had to go up to Biden and say, "Did you say?" I mean, really, they probably had to go to him and say, "Did you say this?" And you know what? Here's the other reality. He probably couldn't remember if he did.
Yeah.
So even now, they're probably like, I wonder if he ever really said this, if he told us he didn't, but if he got, oh my God, do we have a leak? So this throws them into a tizzy and exposes the fragility of their system. And I think this of the neocons who are placing, the world at risk here.
So you got some haters on this, of course, I'm sure, naturally on this. What was the negative response to this?
Well, believe it or not, I haven't gotten a lot of negative response on this. I have gotten a few people here and there that just say something like, that's, I'll put it like this. People struggle for an attack on that. The most they say is, "You're a liar." And I say, "I never claimed to be telling the truth. So how can I be a liar?" That's like calling, Chris Rock and saying, "Chris Rock, you're a liar." No, he's not. He's a comedian.
Right.
So I never put this out and said, "This is true." I'll put it like this. Anybody can go down my timeline on any given day. They'll find a couple of these breaking news, and then there'll be some absurd satire after it. So to argue that somebody couldn't look on my timeline and figure out this pattern is preposterous.
That's right. It's unbelievable. And it's unbelievable that the media ran with it like this. But I think this really speaks to the time that we're in. And like I said, over this past 72 hours, seeing the head of the CIA being trucked down on CBS on Face the Nation this weekend, Condoleezza Rice being brought out to continue to push for more weapons, F-16s into Ukraine, red lines. We heard from Linda Thomas Greenfield, of course, U.S. ambassador, about red lines in China. So your tweet hit right at the cultural zeitgeist moment on all of this, right?
Yeah, there was something else that happened too. And, timing is everything in life. Again, I was an innocent guy. I'm doing what I do every day, right? But the U.S. had just announced that they were going to triple the number of troops or something, which wasn't a lot, but they were, upping the ante in Taiwan. There was the pushback on China. So there was a time when there was a certain amount of instability, shall we say, in the U.S.-China relationship. And I also think that, the Taiwanese people looking at this instability probably started really more thinking to themselves, this has been a philosophical question. But if the missiles and bombs start dropping on us, it's not going to be philosophical anymore. And I think this, some of the people I think in Taiwan started tweeting this out. It hit social media and took on a life of its own. But you can talk about, hey, I'm going to get in a boxing ring and box Mike Tyson on Friday night, and that you can talk all the way up till Thursday. Friday evening before the fight, you're going to start thinking to yourself, I made a mistake here. How do I get out of this?
Right. Mommy, can you help with this one?
Yeah, I'm faking an injury. I twisted my ankle.
Well, Garland Nixon has been my guest, radio talk show host, political analyst, and he's a must follow on Twitter. If you're not already following Garland, there's no excuse not to now. Garland Nixon on Twitter, so you can get some of this. You can be out in front on this before Taiwan and before China freaks out about his next tweets. Garland, great to see you. Great to have you. First time guest here, first time on Redacted. So it's a real treat to have you here. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I watch you guys, so I'm always lurking. I'm always lurking in the background whenever you're live.
Well, I'm always lurking on your Twitter feed, so it goes both ways there. So thanks so much, Garland. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So great to have Garland here on the show. Follow his stuff. He's great. Thanks, Garland. We've got more news to get to here on this Tuesday. We're going to talk about the 15-minute city protests and thousands of people taking to the streets in England on these 15-minute cities. And I saw somebody in the chat saying, what are you guys, crazy? You're talking against 15-minute cities? These are the greatest thing ever. Really? Okay. Well, we'll lay it out. We'll have a debate on it because a lot of people in our chat say this is the worst idea ever. So this is why we welcome debate on this story. It's going to be a good story. And we're also going to talk about Dilbert in just a moment here. But first, we do have a newsletter. Check it out. Go to redacted.inc and please subscribe to it. It's totally free. You get it first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee. And again, it's totally free, 100% free. You just put in your email address. You have to confirm your email address. So Yahoo, Google, all of them, they know that it's not spam. So you'll receive a welcome email. You just have to click confirm. And then tomorrow morning, over your cup of coffee, you'll get the newsletter. And we cover like 4 or 5 stories, kind of in depth, and plus a little funny market updates and things like that to make you laugh a little bit to start your day. So it's a good sort of director's track of what we're covering here on the show. Again, redacted.inc is the place to go. Before we move on, someone in the chat just said, hey, on YouTube, we've got 22,000 people watching us right now on YouTube. And if you would be so kind, we only have 4,000 likes. So if you smash that like button, what it does is it helps us push further out into the YouTube algorithm to kind of force, because they really love suppressing this type of content. They will promote and push out mainstream media broadcasts, but when independent media news producers, we know this for a fact, it gets suppressed. And one way to go around that is actually when you hit that like button, it pushes us further out into the algorithm during a live stream. And I also noticed that a lot of times, if you push the like button, the algorithm does in fact start to float us up to other viewers. But a lot of times I'll review something that we have done in the past. I'll go and refer to a segment just to make sure that, did I get this right? Or, what was the news then, or what have you? And YouTube likes to run mainstream news after. If you just let it roll, you finish our video. A lot of times they bring up some kind of mainstream video from a mainstream media outlet immediately after ours. And I was like, that doesn't go. That's exactly what we didn't just say. Like we don't choose that. Like we're showing you a video, you watch a redacted video, and then they're like, no, that's too dangerous. So then they surface you a CNN video. I wonder if that is your experience too. If you watch our videos and you sort of like are letting it run while you do other things, and then all of a sudden you're like, I didn't turn on CNN. Where'd this come from? Where'd this crap come from? Anyway, thank you for hitting that like button. It really, really helps. All right, protests are popping up around the world against something called 15-minute cities. Now, we've covered the 15-minute cities here on the show, and we warned you about them. And now the warnings are starting to catch on, and more people are becoming aware of what these governments are doing around these 15-minute cities. I like to think about it this way. If the World Economic Forum, what is a 15-minute city? If the house, you would get rid of your car, you would ride your bike everywhere, you would walk to everything you needed within a 15-minute radius of your home, right? The pharmacy, the grocery store, grandma, everything, the school, everything would be within 15 minutes of your home. A quick bike ride, a 15-minute walk. Well, earlier this month, thousands of protesters hit the streets of England to express their hostility towards this concept of the 15-minute city. And if you think this is something out of a fantasy world, it's not. It's actually already been rolled out in a number of cities around the world. In Barcelona, in Melbourne, Australia, parts of Melbourne, Paris, and Milan. So this is already a reality, and they're continuing to push this out in more and more World Economic Forum controlled countries. And protests in England over the past few days capturing this sentiment. Here's Lawrence Fox, who was one of the people interviewed during these protests. He's the leader of the Reclaim Party in England. So I don't know where you come down politically on this guy and what your thoughts are on him, but listen to what he says about the protests specifically in Oxford. Listen.
So why have you come here?
I've come here because I object to being told where I can and can't move in society. I think it's really unhealthy. I think that what's happened is post-pandemic, the powers that be in the government have got this desire to control our movement, our speech, everything. And I think it's really dangerous that there's a grandmother who's picked her kid up from school and she's got to go 12 miles around the ring road to pick up a grandchild. It's more pollution, it's not less.
What the county council would say is this is a traffic calming measure.
Yeah.
That's all they're interested in, is trying to reduce congestion in the centre of this medieval city.
But why would a council get to tell a person, A, this city is mostly ridden by bicyclists. I spent 10 years working here. And B, why does the council have a right to tell someone where they can and can't travel? It shouldn't work that way. We should be making a freer world for everybody every single day, where you're freer to move, you're freer to speak, and you're free to choose what you do with your life.
Isn't the way government works that you elect representatives and they make decisions about the rules?
This is not a popular. Look at that. Does that look like the council of government?
90% of the people in Oxford oppose it.
They oppose this in the same way as they oppose Sadiq Khan's ULEZ scheme in London. They oppose this stuff.
And then it goes on from there. Well, the mainstream media is...
Well, I just want to build on that point. Shouldn't market forces take control of that? If it's getting too crowded in a city, then either people can bike or people can find a way around it, or there should be some kind of innovation to take, like tunneling or what have you. There
subway.
are private market forces that are at work to solve this. And so for the government to say, nope, you can't,
right.
We need to solve it. And then we're going to keep you in these small small regions, like the Hunger Games.
Something that Philip kind of brought up earlier in a previous segment is, whenever government forces you into certain things, it never really works out, does it? When government forces you into something, a way of living, a way of life, projects or otherwise, when has it actually ever worked out? The answer is never. Can anyone think of an example where the government forced you to do something and it worked out?
Lockdowns, that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I made a lot of banana bread.
Keep going.
I'd like to. I don't think that worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this guy in the chat. Someone said, who said that in the chat? Odd Job Bob. I like this title. Says, no, that wasn't who. Edmonton can't be a 15-minute city in the winter. That's a good point. Violent World said, I want 5-minute cities.
Okay.
I want 2-minute cities where literally everything is in my house already.
You had that. We had that. And again, market forces are kind of taking over the things that people liked from lockdown. They are trying to keep, and the things they didn't like, they are not trying to live that way. And so, that was sarcasm. I don't want to go back into lockdown.
Yeah.
And so,
well,
yeah, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, the mainstream media is painting these protests of these 15-minute cities as a conspiracy theory. They're saying, like, the people that showed up at these things are protesters. These guys are conspiracy theorists because they're getting the story wrong here. 15-minute cities, how a plan to make your life more convenient became a full-blown conspiracy. So if you're against this, then apparently you're a conspiracy theorist. They just throw the baby out with the bathwater. As journalist Robert Ridge, though, points out in a piece in RT, some of these points are getting a little conflated, and that's how they're able to label people conspiracy theorists. So I think that this is an important point to make. So, people who are watching Redacted and others who are arguing these points don't fall into these traps where people can paint you as a conspiracy theorist. So let's kind of break this down, what Robert Ridge says. I think it's a really important point. Oxford, where the city we just saw, their 15-minute city plans themselves do not actually include traffic restrictions or fines, instead focusing on making the scheme workable by ensuring that residents have access to everything they need. This includes boosting local retail shops. Okay, so put a pin in that for a moment. Improving delivery services. Okay, put a pin in that for a moment. And other equally benevolent measures, Robert says, with no encroachment on personal freedoms, Robert writes. Given this, the detractors of the 15-minute city have been dubbed conspiracy theorists. Okay, but his next part is important. He said, however, Oxfordshire City Council also has a separate plan, a set of traffic reducing measures, totally separate from this other one, that will go into trial mode next year. And under this plan, residents will not be allowed to drive on some city streets for most of the day unless they have a 100-day permit. They are encouraged to use instead the ring road or public transport. So don't take the car if you have this 100-day permit. Traffic cameras will monitor your compliance, and fines will be imposed if you break this. So these are two separate things, right? And so it's very easy then for the mainstream media to kind of label these people as conspiracy theorists because they might be getting a portion of the story wrong. It's two different council measures that are being blended as one. So we just need to be careful about that. But the point is well taken, and this is exactly what the World Economic Forum has laid out. Two different plans in England are being talked about jointly, so be careful. But here's how the BBC explains what a 15-minute city is. Then I'm going to show you what the World Economic Forum says. So that's why it's not fair to call people like us conspiracy theorists. Watch this BBC explainer.
The 15-minute city is a really simple concept in many ways. It's really just saying that every urban citizen should be able to meet their basic needs within a 15-minute walk or cycle ride from their house.
The concept of the 15-minute city was proposed by French Colombian scientist Carlos Moreno, and aspects of it are starting to be adopted in cities like Paris, Barcelona, and Bogota.
And Milan. And of course, here's the World Economic Forum, how they describe it in their own words on their own website. This is the World Economic Forum's website now, so let's just scroll this. The surprising stickiness of the 15-minute city. And it breaks this down, how this is going to be so sticky. You're going to absolutely love the surprising stickiness of the 15-minute city. See all these happy people with their bikes? So, and it describes that urbanism trends come and go, but the 15-minute city framing of walkable, mixed-use urban development is a lot more than just a fad. The historical roots go back with a long time. We'll be living with for a long time to come, this sort of 15-minute. As climate change and global conflicts causes stress and faster intervals and increasing severity, the 15-minute city will become even more critical. So, of course, that's what they're pinning this on. It's climate change.
Yes.
It's all about climate
I didn't see
change.
any happy pictures of boomers or Gen X's in that picture. It was all millennials.
Yeah, it's all young kids.
Oh, you don't get to live there.
Yeah, you're not. You're kicked
You're
out.
put out
I'm
to
in like the
pasture.
40-minute city down the street.
You have to go live on a farm upstate. That's where you get to go.
They're putting you in a senior home
with my goldfish.
Yeah.
They're putting you in a Governor Cuomo senior home.
There's an episode of Sex in the City where Miranda doesn't want to date this guy because he's never left Manhattan in over a decade. Because she's like, he never gets out of here? No, that's unnormal. Like, that's undesirable in a mate. Someone who won't leave the city.
Won't leave the city, yeah.
It's seriously like you're turning every city into the Truman Show. I mean, that's like you try to go beyond. They're going to like put up walls in each city now. And
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Well, I think that's what the fear is that they're like, you have everything you need right here. You can't leave here without some kind of carbon emissions permit. And that they construct walls around it because they've told us that this is the way to save the planet, and your responsibility is to stay within your Pavlovian circle. And so I think, the concern here is about civil liberties, not about whether or not we want to. Because again, capitalism should take care, or just, I know people don't like that word, or, normal market forces should take care of that. If people are concentrated in one area, then anybody who wants to make some money should go there and open a shoe store. That's sort of how this has worked before, and it's worked out just fine in the past. I get it. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I feel like they tipped their hand though when you were looking at that Oxfordshire thing, because they had the you can't drive on certain cities without the 100-day permit. I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say that permit is probably not free. And so they could probably give you little passes for your little 15-minute coordinates, or and then you need a pass to purchase things outside of that, and of course that pass is probably not going to be free. So it's just it's sort of like not just limiting everybody's movement, because they would never do that. You're not going to get a billionaire living in downtown Manhattan. Exactly, you're not going to get a billionaire living downtown Manhattan that's going to be happy with just sitting in their 15
taking the West Side Highway, not going through town. Yeah.
Unless you have a helicopter, this doesn't affect you, right? So you got to have a helicopter, some kind of flying vehicle. Sheldon, Sheridan Forbes in our chat says, redacted, you can hear Toronto City Council talk about it in 2019. It's public record. So Toronto City Council considering this as well. I didn't know that about Toronto. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, did you ever see the movie Out of Time, I think it's called, with Justin Timberlake, where they had the time on their arms? No. And the rich people who had all the time could travel freely through all the cities. There was no stopping them, but the people that didn't have much time were stuck to these areas where they had to go get their drugs. They had to get, they were all approved places they could go. It just it's very Orwellian, but
yeah.
There's a lot of science fiction-y stuff that sounded like science fiction 3-4 years ago, right? They're like, what, can you believe that? And then in the past 3-4 years, we've seen most of it come to pass.
Yeah.
Now we just call it Tuesday.
Right. From artificial intelligence to ex machina to you name it. It's all
I never thought I would in my life go out for a run and have a policeman tell me, go back home. That's happened
because of the pandemic.
To me because of the pandemic on Easter weekend.
Yeah.
You can't be running outside here. Get back to your house.
What?
Yeah.
Catch me. So on the surface, they pitch this idea as a utopia, right? You can eat outside with your friends on the street, have food outside. No cars will be coming by on these little cafes like in New York City. They were shutting down Times Square. Now you can just walk it, right? And you can walk to your local grocery store. Kids can go to school on foot, right? No need to deal with 2-hour commutes. It all sounds great. And they want you to think of it that way, but it's actually part of a larger Great Reset being rolled out by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Yeah, you will rent the place that you live in so that you won't own anything. You'll be restricted by the movements of your government. The government will tell you in approving you, whether it's through a vaccine passport or some sort of other digital pass, they'll control your movements, and we're going to provide government subsidies. And if you don't, we are going to take your government subsidies away. You will not receive these government subsidies. You're already seeing this in action in Brazil, the threats of getting the vaccine, or you will not receive government subsidies under Lula da Silva announced 2 weeks ago. So let's say and this is one of the pieces I want to point out because these are some of the distractions and some of the protests here. Let's say you live in zone 1, right? And you are restricted to zone 1 on certain days. You can't go to zone 2 or zone 3. It's like the Hunger Games. And if you do, you'll be fined as a result. Or it'll come out of your allotment that you're allowed to travel freely.
No, you get clubbed by the peacekeepers.
Right.
That's what happens in the Hunger Games.
The reaping. You'll be a part of the reaping. So, you can't go to zone 5 today, but what if grandma lives in zone 5 and she's fallen and she needs a special help from you over the next few weeks?
Well, don't worry. We've already established that grandma's put out to pasture.
Yeah, I guess we're sending
only
her
productive working people inside the 15-minute cities, because it's I'm going to bring up another science fiction movie. It's like Gattaca. You're no longer a productive worker. You're out of here, right? We only want...
Or worse, like Auschwitz,
Yes, someone in the chat talked about how this is like the Jewish ghettos. You all go in here this is what... Yeah.
You're frail. Oh, you've got children. You're going to the left because we know where that leads. To the right, you've got a few working weeks left in you. We'll send you to the right. As Dr. Jordan Peterson points out...
Gym.
As Dr. Jordan Peterson points out on Twitter... Here he says, the idea that neighborhoods should be walkable is lovely. The idea that idiot tyrannical bureaucrats can decide by fiat where you're allowed to drive is perhaps the worst imaginable perversion of that idea. And make no mistake, it's part of a well-documented plan. Yes, a well-documented plan from the World Economic Forum. It's all laid out by them. So that's why they were encouraged by these protests in England. Keep it up. If you've got protests in your neck of the woods, let us know about it here, and we will share it here either in the newsletter on Redacted or right here on the show. So thank you guys so much for bringing that to our attention and making sure that you're a part of this anti-15-minute city BS. Go ahead, Philip.
And one of the things like that I initially loved about Portland, and it's a bit different now, but when I first moved here in like 2004, was that throughout the city and the entire metro area, there are these tiny little, almost like small town downtowns, where you'd get like a block or two of just little shops, little things like that. You'd have like a bar, a couple restaurants and stuff like that. And you could, if you were in one of these neighborhoods, you could walk to these little downtowns, and every like little area had one, and it was really nice. It's really convenient to have everything right there. So like definitely there is an aspect of this where it's a benefit. It's beautiful to have that, but it's when they force you into it.
Right.
That becomes the problem.
Yeah.
Or you can't leave
like
it.
Natalie was saying.
Yeah, or you can't leave it, right? And you're not allowed to have a car. You can't go out to the country. You can't leave to go visit grandma. You can't go see, or you're restricted based on your certain carbon footprint allotment number, based on, what days you can travel, based on your 100-day permit, et cetera.
Right. And I mean, the government, can create these naturally beautiful, sort of microcosms of neighborhoods that you talked about through tax incentives to, rebuild certain neighborhoods. But again, that's entrepreneurs who build those things up. And this is the reason that the government gave up on government housing, because they suck at it, because it's ugly, it's terrible, they can't manage it. That's why we have the projects as an undesirable place to live. No one wants to live where government has set up housing.
And you just reminded me of something. I told you earlier to put a pin in something, and I forgot to pull the pin back out again, which is that they're going to bolster retail, right? The idea is, so we're going to do all this, but we're going to really make sure that your retail providers have everything you need. Haven't we heard that before? Right? So you're going to live in this 15-minute city. You're not going to drive anywhere, but your government is going to take care of you. It's going to make sure that your local grocery stores are fully stocked. We're going to make sure that all of these things are provided for you, that your schools are taken care of, that your water sources are great, like all of these things. So really, you're going to put the government faith that we're going to make our living environment perfect, because the government has a great track record of that right now, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So you're really putting your faith in that. Let us know your thoughts on all of this and more. We've got more news to get to. We're going to cover this Dilbert story, but to do that, we're going to move over to Rumble, because we're going to say some things that, YouTube's not a fan of. So we do have a Rumble channel. Our stream will continue live. I saw someone in the chat saying, the only reason I have Rumble is because of Redacted. I don't even have a Facebook page, and I love the sound of that.
Thank you so much.
Who has a Facebook page anymore? Please cancel that crap.
My mom just sent me a message on Messenger, because I still use Messenger a lot for things. My mom sent me a message like, "Hey, I got a new car. Did you see the pictures I posted?" I was like, "Posted where?" And I was like, "Oh, Facebook." And I was like, "No, I don't think I've opened Facebook in 3 years. I flat out just haven't even opened it."
The only time I open it is when, I look at something on Google Maps, when I'm looking for a business or something, and their website is a Facebook page, and then it pushes me over there, and I'm like, I don't want to see this. Get a real website, or just don't have one.
You realize how ugly Facebook is when you have to go that experience. It's amazing. We post some of our short video content over on those platforms, all in an effort just to bring you over here. We don't, anyway, they're there. So, but I never even use it. Once in a while, you'll say, "Hey, did you see that thing on Instagram?" I'm Instagram.
I do still like Instagram. Yeah. Sometimes I post there.
Anyway, all right, come on over to Rumble. We are live, rumble.com/redacted, rumble.com/redacted. We're going to say goodbye to our YouTube audience now. Thank you guys, but come on over.